It's arguably the most important sector in Nigeria. Powers everything, really. And that's the power sector. It's been one sector that has been problematic, just straight and clear, for Nigerians ever since pre-NEPA days, from NEPA transition to PHCN. Now we have the arrangement with the DISCOs, a transmission company, and the GENCOs as well. But still, that sector remains a tricky one. So hopefully we end the year with another look at the sector to get a sense of what more we need to do. So 2025 will be a bright year, pun intended. We're joined by an engineer, Mr. Kingsley Odo, energy expert and essay to former Minister of Power, Abubakar Lee. You're welcome to Sunrise Daily.
Thank you very much, Kaidi. Pleasure to be here.
I don't know how it is for you experts in that sector, but I can tell you for the average Nigerian, the energy sector, the power sector specifically, has been a very problematic, stressful, lots of headache. It's one sector that is tied to people's blood pressure. Because you are worried. When will this take light? When would I have light in that sense? I want this coming year to be a year where we just go straight to the point, right? We don't have time for, trying to meander and go around. So let's start. The Minister of Power. Should he stay? Has his performance been up to par, below par, or above par?
I think in looking at the myriad of challenges that are before him, you will say that he's done well. He's done well in some sense, and he's not done well in some sense. So, but speaking of the generality of the sector, I think he should stay. The reason is that he's first, like I said earlier in some other on some other platforms, I said he had come from a finance background onto a very technical background, but in a short time, he has learned a whole lot. And so with that investment, you don't want it to go to waste. Because he's learned so much from when he came in, the little bits and pieces of the sector, the challenges of the sector. So he has to now put on his very core administrative hat or cap, whatever the case may be, and then drive the sector in a way that its productive performance becomes critical. So we say he should stay because he has come to terms with some of the challenges in the sector. You can't wish that away. So in my view, I think he should stay.
So as an examiner, you're rating him what, above average?
Above
Excellent?
average.
Above average.
Above average.
Excellent?
No, above average.
It's very interesting. As I said, Nigerians are the ones feeling this. Yes, the minister had said that we're still struggling to do 6,000 megawatts. So let's start from there. What should be our target? What should be the minimum we should be doing as a nation of 200 million people?
So consistent 10,000 megawatts would not be bad. That's 10 gigawatts. Consistent. Yes.
Would that give us at least 20 hours of electricity?
Yes, it will give some sense of stability. Remember that there's a whole spread across the nation. But we'll come to that in our conversation. So consistent 10 gigawatts, which is 10,000 megawatts, will bring a sense of stability to the sector, and also will bring a sense of liquidity and a sense of industrial push. So 6,000 would not be it. 10,000 would be something that would bring some sense of stability.
Now, I'll get to the challenge around 6,000, but I want to lay the background, right? So 10,000
will be fine.
Would give us some sense
of stability.
But not 24 hours electricity.
Well, it's a difficult situation looking at the infrastructure that we have.
I understand, but I want to know what will give us consistent 24 hours electricity. How many megawatts? Nationwide.
Recall that there are core centers, heavy consuming centers, Lagos, Abuja, Port Harcourt. These centers, Ibadan. So these centers are core consuming centers. Then you go hinterland just a little bit, you find that there's lots of people that are off-grid, and mini-grids.
And there's renewable energy. And
so
for them. I'm talking about the core centers.
The core centers, yes. 10,000 megawatts will be fine. It will give a sense of, if we get 15, 20 hours every day across.
No. At this point, I think we should talk about excellence.
Okay, so
I think we've talked about, I don't want to say mediocre too much. We've said, let's manage things. Let's do below average. If it's average, we're good. But we can't keep doing that. So I want us to set high standards, what it should be, then we'll walk backwards. That's why I'm asking.
So for an ideal situation, we need about 20 gigawatts.
20 gigawatts, that's 20,000 megawatts.
20,000.
Consistently.
Consistently.
Good. So let's come to our reality now. So that's the ideal. We're still struggling to do 6,000 megawatts. And the minister recently said that, well, it's as a result of vandalism. So we're struggling to do 4,000, 4,900 megawatts. And I have heard that for too long. If it's not vandalism, you hear the grid collapse or whatever appropriate term is used in that sector. But the point is, this is something we're used to. You can almost predict.
Yes.
So why is it that we keep having the same challenges and we've not been able to fix it?
It's a very, very good question. It's a very challenging time. So let me say this. I need to backtrack a little. Okay. So here you have a grid that is well over 30 years. Yes, 30, and not properly managed and maintained. So it's aged a whole lot, right? So with that in mind, you would know why we cannot consistently have this, and then there will not be some form of collapse, some form of disturbances. So that is one side. It means that the equipment, they've aged a whole lot. And what requires maintenance and change have not been changed in a long time, right? So that is one. Two, we're a struggling nation. Poverty, insecurity is a major challenge in this country. I mean, you can't wish it away. It means that because people are poor and maybe not properly oriented, they go and think that their national cake is down in these towers, right? And then selling whatever it is that they want to be able to sell. And so when the tower comes down in some remote Bauchi-Gombe corridor, because it's called a radial system, because ideally we should have a ring system, because it's radial. Once the tower is down, it's like a pack of cards. I've said this before.
I have to pause you for a moment.
Right.
What is radial? What is ring? Why do we have radial and not the ideal?
Again, it's where we're coming from, right? So ideally, I'm sure even the managers of the sector must have known that we needed a ring system so that we can backfeed at some point. But a radial system means that you just keep going forward. Means that if this comes down, if upstream, right, if something happens upstream, the whole downstream is in total darkness. And I mean, rightfully so, because you're just a one-way traffic. A ring system would have been that if this line comes down, I can feed from another source and another source, right? So it means that your up times are more guaranteed than your down times. So, but if you have a challenge upstream in one line, for example, the Bauchi-Gombe line, the whole of that axis comes down. And then you begin to find ways to solve those problems. So that is a challenge that we have had, and I think they're trying to remedy those challenges.
Let me get this right. So we have a sector that you appoint, well, people that should be the very best in that sector. Let's just assume that's the reality, because this is a very important sector to the success or the productivity or otherwise of our country. So you get the very best people, I imagine, in the MDAs, as a minister as well, and all the other, contributing factors, right? So you get the very best people, and this is what we're able to get. I don't know if you catch my drift.
I do.
Does it make sense?
Sometimes implementation of infrastructure projects of this nature, they are phased. It means that maybe we want to run a line first, and then we'll bring the backfeed much later to form the ring. But if that doesn't happen, and 1 year passes, 2 years, 3 years, you just make do with the budget that you have, I presume, and then you just keep running until a challenge comes. You now come back to say, oh, if we had done this, because it's in the master plan, but we have never come around getting it done. I think it's at the forefront right now in terms of discussions that they must form rings that would enable uptime or redundancies. That's what we call it, N-1 redundancies in those areas, so that you can have a more guaranteed uptime.
Again, I still say that there were people who were put in charge of, the infrastructure, the sector, and they come out and say, we've done well. But these problems still persist. Some of them rate themselves excellent, above average. You have been, you've had a front seat view of the challenges in this sector. And I'm trying to break it down for the average Nigerian, because the technicalities are really overwhelming for the average person. All they just want is be able to switch on, flip on that switch and get power. Yes. They want to blend, they want to do their little business. They want to ensure there is at least power to get by. So what would you say is the biggest challenge of this sector? And I'll list some of the possibilities you can add to it. So is it a challenge of finance? I know at some point you were going to talk about the vandalism part. Correct, and you were going to blame the people. But that is why you have the government, right? You don't hear that people steal the president's vehicles, for example, or they steal the president's transformer. There's adequate security. Why? Because that is a very vital person, and by extension, everything that concerns him is very important. So you don't touch it anyhow, right? So is it a finance thing? Is it a problem of policy? Is it the infrastructure? You talked about the current minister now has a background in finance.
Yes.
So how much of the technicality does he know, right? So is it a problem of technical know-how as well? What would be that biggest problem for you?
The biggest problem for me is the security of our infrastructure. Without infrastructure, power is not electromagnetic in the sense you've got to have a physical wire running from point A to point B for you to have electricity. If those infrastructure are tampered with for whatever reason, then we're going to constantly have the challenges that we have. So there's going to be first an orientation issue of the ones that we have. Why do we bring them down? Because the cost of bringing them back up, I recall that the entire northern axis for 12 weeks did not have power at some point, largely due to vandalism. So vandalism and insecurity, if you ask me, is a very major issue that we need, all of us collectively need to deal with. For example, let's leave the collapse that's happened about 12 times in this year. It's sad, but it's a reality. And we've had vandalism of over between 63 to 100 attempts at the grid structure, which is the towers, nationwide, largely in the north, right? But nationwide, if you ask me, because it's happening in Benin, happening in Port Harcourt, happening, of course, largely in the Gombe, Bauchi axis, Guagalada axis as well. So we need to put everything in context and say, look, I know we may not be able to deal with issues of vandalism in one day, but there has to be an orientation where, and this is beyond power. You see our rail tracks, people go and vandalize the issue. So it's a comprehensive, complex issue. So that's one that we need to deal with, and it's very major, so that we can go forward from where we are, as against going backwards and then coming back to where we were and then going forward.
I find it very interesting, because the operators will tell you that they need more funding. They need more money. They tell you, in fact, former President Muhammadu Buhari, in an exclusive interview with Channels Television, talked about the whole process of privatizing, that some of the people who got, got the discourse did not have the know-how. They weren't ready for it. That doesn't sound like, except those are the people that vandalized our power sector. It's also been said that they don't have, money to invest in infrastructure. That's why they said, let's start charging cost-reflective tariffs. So I'm not sure where vandalism comes in, but we have to go to Abuja now. Kayla is in Abuja, and of course, she's a Nigerian like you and
Kayla, troublesome Kayla.
So Kayla, over to you. Your Over to you, Kayla.
I'll take that as a compliment, Mr. Kingsley.
Yes, compliment,
Thank you
compliment.
so much for joining us. But I want to put some figures to what you said. You just mentioned a few places where the towers were vandalized. No. Mr. Bolaji Tunji, who's the I think he's the media aide to the Minister of Power, released a statement over the weekend for his principal. He said it was 128 vandalized transmission towers, 128. And he says it cost them 8.8 billion to repair those vandalized transmission towers. And then, I want to be able to get your thoughts on what's really going on. The vandalism of these towers, who is supposed to protect these power installations? Let's start from there. Is it the NSCDC?
Thank you, Kayla. It's an interesting question, but so what banks do when issues of fraud, potential issues of fraud happen is they put some levels of firewalls and security infrastructure and some levels of protection so that the issues of fraud are minimally reduced. So let's come to the power sector first. The power sector, I have, in one interview in the past with you guys over the Chamberlain and Kayla, I recall I mentioned to you that we operate a blind grid, and a smart grid, an intelligent grid would have been such that before vandalism takes place, there would have been a notification, and this is by way of SCADA systems, right? SCADA systems that are intelligent, that give us information, and they're able to see the entire grid, from one ground center or a control center. That is not happening. So let us first deal with what the power sector or what the handlers, which is TCN in this case, what they should have been doing. And I hear that they are enabling the SCADA systems now, so we want to see the full operation of it. But that is the first thing that needs to be done, okay? So once we have a smart grid, an intelligent grid, then we can nib some of these activities in the board. At least if something is happening in some remote location that I know that is happening before it comes down, becomes an advantage. So that is one way to deal with this. The second way to deal with this is we are more reactive than proactive in this country. And I expect that we should be more proactive in dealing with all our issues, especially an orientation matter. National assets are national assets. And it belongs to all of us. It's our collective funds and whatever you want to call it, to ensure that those assets are not tampered with. The moment we start tampering with these assets, Kayla, it becomes a very big problem. And the people who tamper with this, they believe that this is their own share, if you ask me. Or maybe it's just share sabotage. One is that they believe that...
But you're not answering my question, Mr. Kingsley, because you see, we have to be able to plug where the hole is coming from. And I understand that. It's a national thing. We're supposed to have ownership of these things and be a little bit more patriotic when it comes to national assets. But there's an agency whose responsibility it is to protect national assets. My question is, at least from an insider's point of view, what kind of collaboration is the minister having, the Ministry of Power? What collaboration are they having with the NSCDC? If it is the NSCDC who are supposed to be protecting these national assets, is there a handshake going on there? We're hearing him call up on the military and all whatnot. The security of these assets, I mean, you can't stop people from committing crime. You can tell them not to do it, but if they want to commit crime, they will. So the enforcement of protection of these assets is where I'm more interested in. And while I'm getting you to respond to that, that's not the only issue that the minister raised over the weekend. There was something he called, and I want to get his words exactly. He said something about the cash backing of the subsidy And that relates to the debt that is owed to generation companies and gas companies. Now, he says this year the subsidy will be approximately 2.3 trillion, but only 450 billion naira was budgeted. Now, he said these are the two things, vandalism and this cash backing for subsidy, just so we can get some kind of understanding of where things are and what he means by this.
Okay, so it's because, thank you, Kayla, first. I appreciate that question. So let's deal with the first one, which is the collaboration with NSCDC, right? That's the agency of government that is supposed to protect all our assets and national infrastructure. I don't work for the ministry, neither do I work for NSCDC, right? But what I do know is that they don't have enough manpower to survey these national assets, especially our lines and towers nationwide. So you would need some level of technology if you don't have the physical manpower. You know, there are ways to do this. If you cannot physically bring your men to go into the remote Gombe line that stretches kilometers into the arid lands, what kind of surveillance would you put in place to drive your patrol vehicles along those lines on a consistent basis? It's just, for me, some kind of wastage. So what I think is there must be investment, and intentional investment in technology. And that is why I mentioned earlier that we needed some intelligence wrapped into this process, whether from the ministry's point of view or from the NSCDC's point of view. And this is across all assets. The way we run, by way of just trying to physically monitor, Nigeria is a big country. That want to physically monitor this country, driving the hillocks into the bush, into the arid lands, it's just not going to work. Lots of people don't do this in other climes. So the expectation I have, or I think that should be things that should be put in place, Kayla, is we need to invest in technology, smart intelligence to pick information and give us just-in-time information so that we can take actions. Other than that, we'll be really wasting a lot of time. The second thing is cash backing that you mentioned. We're here because of the expectations. Kade mentioned earlier that the discos were expected to inject funds when they got these discos. Now, they borrowed monies from within. I hear technical partners came from offshore, but largely monies came from within. The expectation was that monies were going to come from outside of the country. Whether it was rightly privatized or wrongly privatized, that's a conversation for another day. But what I do want to say is that since that money did not come in ab initio to drive the process, from day one, we started having liquidity issues. And so it had built up to this point. You know, when energy goes downstream and money does not come back upstream, there has to be a gap, and that gap must be covered. The gas supplier has a contract with government and with the GENCOs, I beg your pardon, and guaranteed by government. And the GENCOs have a contract with government or backed by government, but they have to be seen to deliver energy to the discos. The monies don't come back adequately, and so the cash backing becomes necessary. 2.3 trillion is actually the truth, and it's increasing every day. So we're saying, how do we reset that whole process? If you ask me, Kayla, I think that the discos must find ways to raise capital. Oh, we have had this conversation in the past that they are illiquid, they're in the reds, they cannot raise capital. Then they should be able, there has to be ingenious ways for the sector to be liquid. Without paying for energy, we are never going to come out of this, because government will continue to provide those guarantees and cash backing that cannot sustain the sector. So a sector can be sustained when it is business. It means that for energy consumed, right pricing and right monies are paid back, and the monies are not wasted or diverted, if you like.
Right.
But the monies come back to paying for gas, paying for the Gencos. Once we have a genuine conversation wrapped around this, then we'll be seen to be making headway in the sector. Other than that, Kayla, trust me, we're still going to continue to have this challenge.
Well, we don't want that. But again, we've endured this for decades. But I know that Nigerians are tired of having to go over this time and again. I mean, we can talk about how people have been put into bans now, whether or not that is discriminatory. And that's still a thorny issue, right? But I want you to give a projection, maybe not a projection. Does it look like we're on the right track? And what do you expect in the new year? Is this the year where we finally get some semblance of stability? Again, we can talk about how the TCN blames the Gencos and the Discos. You're not able to give me enough power to wheel. And they say, no, you don't have the infrastructure. Hey, look at your infrastructure anyway. That's why it's collapsed. So there's a lot of back and forth. You talked about the gas and all of that, but give us projections from what you've seen of this minister, whom you said has taken time to learn. In 30 seconds, is he on the right track, and is this year we get stability?
Yes, I can say yes, for two reasons. First one is the government's metering initiative. There's a PMI that government set up. What that is going to do is ring-fence the money. So we've had what you call estimated billing customers. It means that whatever you consume is not what you pay for, because I just do you a mini, more kind of arrangement where I look at your area and I say, you know what, this is what you should be paying, and then I just continue to bill you. So whether I use all the air conditioners in my house, or I use one, or whether I don't use at all, I'm going to be paying the same amount next door, who maybe it just has lights. I mean, it's unfair. So what government has done, or what they're doing, is that in the coming Q1, they're going to give meters. I think that's a 4-year plan or 5-year, I'm not sure.
Right.
They're going to give meters to every household so that you can pay for what you consume. And you're not only paying, the money goes into the sector, and it's real because everybody can account for it, as against when I charge you for energy you may or may not have consumed, and then the money doesn't come again back upstream. So
it's very interesting. It's like saying you're using a mobile phone without a SIM card. That's very...
and that's what it has been. And
again,
that is over 50% of consumers.
Again, we have to talk about putting the best minds in the right positions, because you would expect that if we had the best minds in these positions, they'll make the best decisions and we'll be better for it. But we have to thank you so much. You've said that this is a year we get some stability, 2025.
2025, yes.
Okay, so Nigerians heard you. But of course, you're not the minister, so...
No, but I'm very sure the policies...
A lot of liability doesn't lie on you right now, but we have to thank you so much.
Yes, thank you.
We have to thank you so much.
Right.
Clearly an ongoing conversation. We'll be speaking with Engineer Kingsley Odo, to former Minister of Power, Abubakar Aliyu. So he's speaking from a place of understanding and experience. Thank you for your time, and I wish you 2025 that has a lot of power.
Compliments of the season to all of you guys.
Certainly. Thank you very much, sir. Well, there you have it. Look at that all-important sector, the power sector. Kayla, definitely 2025 beckons, and we'll be here to give Nigerians the update. But we have to thank you so much for being a part of the show. I'm Kayode Okikiodu.
Have a great week ahead. I'm Kayla Magwa.